Hello, we're here today with an adoptee from Toronto,
Mm,
Mireille Landry. Welcome. We're so glad to have you.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for putting up with our rescheduling. We're excited to finally
No
meet you.
problem at all. Me too. I was
I know I
looking forward
really
to
want
it.
to hear your
Me
story because you
too.
have just, I, from what little you wrote,
Hmm.
there's a lot. So,
Definitely.
yes. So just let's dig in. Let's hear
Hmm.
it.
Okay, perfect. Did you guys have any questions specifically, or do you want me to just start from the beginning?
Yeah, just start and then we kind of interject naturally if something, with questions.
Hmm.
Okay, perfect. So it was me and my identical twin sister that were adopted together. We were born in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, actually, so still in Canada, but in the East Coast. And we spent 3 months in foster care, and then we were adopted together by a family still in Cape Breton, but just an hour and a half away from where we were born. And then we grew up there in a small fishing community, a French Acadian fishing community. You might not have heard of that. And when we were 12 years old, we actually traveled to Sydney, Nova Scotia, which is where we were born, for a soccer tournament. And we ended up going to the mall just after the soccer tournament. And it was me and my sister and our friend. And we decided to just go in the photo booths that are in the malls, or that used to be in the malls in the
Hmm.
90s or in the early 2000s. And we took photos together. And then when they came out, we noticed that there were photos that someone had left there. And it was just these two women that we didn't recognize. So we were 12 at the time, and we're just like, okay, we'll walk around the mall with the photos. If we see those ladies, we'll just stop them and give them back their photos. So that's what we did. We found them and we went up to them. We're like, oh, you forgot your photos in the photo booth. We thought nothing of it. And then we kept walking around the mall. And then we saw those same two ladies talking to our adoptive mom. So we thought that was kind of coincidental. And then we start to approach. And as we get closer, my adoptive mom looks up and tells us that the woman that we just gave the photos to was our birth mother and her sister.
Wait,
What
okay.
So
was this pure coincidence?
yeah, it was pure
And
coincidence.
they, so, I mean,
Wait,
divine intervention, it sounds like to
Yeah.
me,
come
Yeah.
on.
really,
So
a
that's how
picture
we
left in the
accidentally.
photo booth.
Yeah,
And
I
how did
know.
the mothers know? Like, tell me
So
that.
we didn't know this at the time, but now we've since known that because we've had that conversation. And they said that they recognized us. So when we approached them and gave them the photos, they knew that it was us. And they knew because my birth mother had signed an exchange of information where my adoptive mother every year would send photos of us to the agency. And
Oh,
then she accepted them, but we didn't really know whether or not she accepted them. My mom would just send them every year. So she
she
knew what
was
we
seeing
looked
your
like.
birthdays and all this.
Exactly. So she knew exactly who we were when we came up to her. And even she said that even if she didn't have the photos, she would have known that it was her daughters. But even my sister and I, in hindsight, we remember kind of feeling that something big was about to happen as we were approaching and seeing those two ladies talking to our mom. I remember my heart started pounding, and me and my sister have talked about it since, and she said she felt the same way, like we knew something was about to happen. And that's how we met our birth mother accidentally at the mall. And then that
That
kind
is a
of,
first, I have to
yeah,
say.
yeah.
That's crazy. That's divine
Wow.
intervention, like what Sarah said.
Yeah, no, it is crazy. Even the more I've said that story so many times, and it's
It's
still
still
crazy
crazy.
when yeah, exactly.
So your adoptive, so obviously your birth mother knew what your adoptive mother looked like and was able to find her in the mall that day.
Yes. So she said that she actually kind of followed us around
Oh,
until she saw us talk to our mom, but she did recognize her. And I knew this too. I knew that they had met once. So my birth mother, my birth parents, and my adoptive parents had met once before our adoption. So they knew what each other looked like, but it had been 12 years. So they had changed a little bit. But my birth mother said that she recognized my adoptive mother once she saw us. She kind of followed us and saw us speak to her.
So
So yeah,
obviously your adoption conversations were open in your household, it
yes,
sounds like. And
yeah,
your your adoptive mother said, "Oh, this is your birth mother." So it wasn't any kind of negative thing. She
No,
didn't
not at
portray it
all.
as any kind of negative thing.
No. And so we're biracial, my sister and I, black and white. And then my adoptive parents are white and my birth mother is white. So we always knew that we were adopted because we just would have realized, I think, the older we got, but they never hid that from us. And then we also knew that our birth mother was white. So, and I knew that she had blonde hair and blue eyes. So even when my mom said, "This is your birth mother," I wasn't completely shocked that she didn't have the same features as me or didn't
Mhm.
necessarily look like me. But
How
yeah,
did
it was never
how
hidden
did
from
your
us.
adopted mom handle that day? That was okay for her? Like
I think I don't remember noticing anything, but in hindsight, now that I'm an adult, I can imagine that there were a lot of emotions of what does this mean? I do remember after that initial meeting, we didn't see our birth mother again for some time. And I was 12, so I don't necessarily remember being a part of the conversations as to why, but I can imagine it was like my adoptive parents trying to figure out how they should deal with that because it was supposed to be a closed adoption. So we weren't supposed to know anything until we were 18. And then we were supposed to make that decision. But now all of a sudden we're 12, we've met our birth mother. So now it's kind of like, what do we do now? We know where she lives. We know what she looks like. We have her contact information. Do we let them have a relationship with her? Is there a reason why it was closed and they should wait till they're 18? Is it too early? I haven't really had that conversation as an adult with my adoptive mother to talk about what that was like, which I should, but I can imagine it was a lot for her,
Mhm.
especially because she's the mom and us meeting our birth mother. I feel like it was maybe different for her than it was for my dad, for example. Like it
Mhm.
Yeah.
wasn't a threat to that relationship, I guess, for lack of a better word. But yeah, I can imagine it was overwhelming for her as it was for us. We didn't really know what that meant. I remember her asking, "Do you have any questions for me?" And I was like, "Nope." I couldn't think of one question.
At the
I mean,
moment,
it's
it's
so
like,
you're
yeah.
young too. It's like,
Exactly.
had
Yeah.
you wondered up to that point about your birth mother? Like, what were you told by your adoptive family?
We were told what they knew. So we were told that my birth mother was 15 years old at the
Mm.
time of our birth. So she was really young, and that my birth father was also young. They were both teenagers, and that my birth mother didn't have any family who was in a position to help her raise us, but that she wanted to keep us, and that the decision was made out of love because she loved us so much. Kind of that classic story that a
Yeah.
lot of adoptees are fed, but I actually think that it was true in this case, especially knowing her now, that she genuinely wanted to keep us and would have if she could, but because she didn't have the means to give us the life that she wanted her children to have, she wanted to give
Mhm.
us a better opportunity and a chance at a better life. And I was told that she lived in Sydney, I think, or that I was born in Sydney, Nova Scotia, which is where we ended up meeting her. So even that part, it wasn't a huge surprise that
Mhm.
that's where we would run into her, but still a coincidence that we would run into her at the mall in those circumstances.
No, it's
Mhm.
crazy.
Yeah. And then we were also told that our birth father was Zambian, from Zambia, Africa, and that he had met our birth mother while attending university in Sydney, Nova Scotia. So we knew our cultural or our heritage or background.
Mhm.
And we knew a little bit about both of our birth parents and kind of the circumstances of our adoption.
Was your
Mm.
were you're a transracial adoptee? So how
Yes.
did that affect you? Were you around other people of color where you grew up, or was it just completely whitewashed? And
It was pretty much completely white. So
yeah.
yeah, we weren't exposed to other biracial people or black people necessarily. It was mostly white. There were a few other biracial kids in our school. But other than it was pretty much just me and my sister. So we both say that we're grateful that we had each other because even though looking around in the community or even in our adoptive family, we didn't necessarily see anyone who looked like us. We had an exact mirror in each other because we're identical twins.
Yeah.
So at least we had each other. And then we also had the same experience. So we're going through it together. So to me, I'm just glad that I didn't have to go through it alone and I had her.
And I'm so
Yeah,
glad
I
they
want
kept you together, you know?
Yes.
That's
And
not
my
always the
adoptive
case.
parents actually told me that at the time there were a lot of prospective adoptive parents. And when they found out that my parents were getting two babies, some people were like, oh, well, they should separate them so that
oh,
two families can get a
Uh,
child instead of one
oh
family
my.
getting a child or getting two
It's like,
children.
hello, they're twins.
And this was
Yeah, I can't
what
imagine.
year was this?
1991.
Okay,
Mhm.
1991. They're
Yep.
still,
We just, yep.
oh
hmm
my gosh.
Mind-boggling. I
They
can't
were
imagine not
really,
having my sister or finding out late that I had a twin, because I know
well, I
would
that
mean,
have,
has
there
happened.
there is scientific research of how damaging it is to separate twins.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
there,
And
you know, and
even
they knew that
in,
in 1991.
yes,
yes,
they did.
exactly. And even in my adoption file, so even though we met our birth mother so young, about 2 years ago, my sister and I were just like, we should still request our adoption file. We have access to it. We just were curious about what was written about the first 3 months of our lives before our adoption. And there's a paragraph that says it's from October 1991, and we were born in August. So we're 2 months old, and it's a social worker report. And it says that a close relationship exists between the twins. When one is happy, the other is happy. When one
Mm.
is upset, the other is upset. And that if we weren't looking at each other, we would start to cry. So that we always had to be together. So even at that young age, there's already that strong bond. I can't imagine them
I
having
can't
separated us.
imagine. And they used to do that. And
Hmm.
to think that someone that they still would do that.
Right. Yeah.
It's infuriating.
Yeah, definitely.
So, so then when did you end up seeing her again? So you
Mhm.
went through
Oh,
and
yeah.
so do you think, I mean, having your sister maybe took away, lessened, I would say, some of that longing that you had for your birth mother? Because do you think that helped?
I kind of think it did, actually. Even when you said, like, did you think about your birth mother before that, or did you wonder about her before that? I don't remember doing so that much in my early childhood and upbringing. And I think maybe it did have to do with the fact that I had my sister. Like, at least I had that bond. Like you
And
said, I
that
wasn't really
mirror
longing.
image.
Yeah, that
Mhm.
mirror. I didn't realize that I was longing for anything or that anything was missing because I have that bond in my sister. But then once we met her, it was like, oh wow, because we did kind of look like her, even though she's white, blonde, blue-eyed, and we have different features. It was like we had the same teeth. So my sister and I had braces. I think maybe around the time we were 12. And when we met our birth mother, before braces, our two front teeth were like crooked a little bit and inverted or something
Yeah.
like that. And when we met our birth mother, she had the exact same teeth. And it was like, whoa, like another person who has the same genetics as
Yeah.
me. This is so weird. Because
Yeah.
the only person that I've ever seen that I had ever seen before that had any sort of similarity to me was my sister. So then seeing it in someone else was kind of mind-boggling to me. But then after that meeting, I feel like it might have even been a couple of years. Like it might have even been when we were 14 or 15 when we saw her again. I'll have to double check with my sister on the time frame. But then we started, every time we would go to the area where she lived, which we did often because we often played soccer there, she would come to our games. We would go visit there and meet her extended family, like her father, so our grandfather. She had a son. So then we met her son.
Your brother.
Our brother, yeah, who had always known he had sisters, which is
Oh,
so
he did.
weird. Yeah, because to him, he had always had sisters and he was just meeting his sisters for the first time. He was always just told, you have sisters, but they don't live with us. They love you. You'll
Oh,
meet them one day, like things like that. And so to him, he was so excited to meet his sisters finally. But to us, we're just now realizing that we have a brother and trying to figure out what that means.
How
So we
much
meet our
younger?
brother. He's
How
only
much?
3 years younger,
Only
actually.
3 years.
So
So
yeah, he's pretty
she
close.
was
She
eight,
was 18.
18.
Yeah, she was still a teenager when she had
wow.
him.
And did she
Mhm.
marry his father?
No. So I think by the time she met us, she didn't have a relationship with him at all. I don't think. So yeah, so she raised him as a single mom as well. Or I guess what she would have with us. I don't know.
Yeah.
But so
speculate.
at any point from the time you were 12 and then you would go visit her and all this stuff, was there any talk of your birth father and
Yeah.
meeting
curious.
him and
Yes. So once we met her, then it was like, okay, the closed adoption thing is kind of done.
Yeah.
So
Over.
we had asked her, we had asked her what she knew of our birth father now, or if she still had contact with him. And she told us that his younger sister had actually ended up attending the same university. So from Zambia, his younger sister, who was, I think, quite a bit younger than him. So it's 12 years later, she's now attending university in the same city. And my birth mother had ended up getting in contact with her through a mutual friend and ended up telling her, you know, I knew your brother 10 years ago. And just so you know, we had twin girls and we gave them up for adoption. And his sister didn't know.
I'm
And she
sure.
said, no one in the family knows of this. And she was shocked. Like she has since told me that her reaction was one of like grieving a loss, because she had no idea that she had nieces. She said she always
Aw.
wanted a sister and she only had brothers, and that we would have been like those little sisters because we were only 12 years younger than her. And so, yeah, it was very shocking for her to learn that. And so then what happened was she put us in contact with our birth father, who we started sending letters to. He was living in South Africa at this point. He was married and starting his own family. Actually, I believe his wife was pregnant with their first child at the time. And so he's writing us letters, we're communicating. And then the talk is starting to happen about, okay, are you going to tell your parents? Because now we want to meet our extended family in Zambia. And he's kind of not wanting to do that. And it ended up, I don't know how long it took, but it ended up being that my aunt, his sister, gave him an ultimatum and said, you either tell them or I do. And she ended up telling her parents on his behalf because he was kind of dragging his feet. So she told them that they had grandchildren. At this point, I think we were 16. So we're 16 when they're finding out that they have their first grandchildren that they knew nothing about,
Aw.
are 16 years old, living in Canada. And so again, they were shocked. They have the same reaction as their daughter did. And their immediate reaction was, we get our granddaughters here. Like we want to meet our granddaughters. And it took some time, but we started a relationship with our aunt first, since she lived in the same area. And then through her, with her help, we planned a trip to Zambia, actually in 2011. So at that point, we were 19. And myself, my sister, my adoptive mother, and my Zambian aunt all traveled to Zambia together to meet my grandparents for the first time.
Oh my
And our
goodness.
extended family. So we met like so many people.
And
in
your father,
Zambia.
did you meet your father?
No,
oh,
we didn't. So he was
What?
supposed to go, he was supposed to attend.
And he
Everything was, and yeah, I still to this day don't know why. But when we got there a few days in, his parents, our grandparents, ended up telling us he's not coming. We never got a straight answer as to why. And to this day, over 10 years later, we still haven't met him.
Oh my
He's the
goodness.
only person in our entire
and does
birth
he
family.
is he in contact with you at all, or did he just stop contact?
Not really. It's like pretty much since that time, he hasn't really contacted us. Every once in a while, he'll respond, but not often. And I couldn't tell you why. I have no clue.
I'm wondering
Your
if
guess
it's,
is as good as
Do you-
mine.
the
do
new
you talk
wife
to-
or something.
That has crossed my mind,
The
but
first
I can
babe.
only speculate. Yeah,
have you had contact with her at all?
never, not once. He used to communicate with us and send letters and emails and even phone calls, but never with her. And the other thing is that for our trip to Zambia, she was actually pregnant with her second child. So
Yeah.
maybe that's why he ended up getting cold feet and staying, because just to prioritize his family. I don't know.
There could be a
So
lot
you
of
have
pressure
two-
of that.
Yeah, a lot of pressure. Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
You have two siblings through him.
Oh my
Yes, two
goodness.
siblings through him that we don't even know if they know about us.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
We're
they're
not sure.
young. They're super young, right?
Yeah, at this point, I believe his son would be turning 18 if he's not
Oh,
already 18.
Not
And
that
then
young.
his daughter, I think, would be maybe 13 or something.
And I
And my
wonder,
sister and
and the
I are 31.
grandparents, you don't know if the grandparents have told that, you don't know any of that.
I'm not sure. I find it's different. It's a different culture. So I
Yeah.
find everything's really hush hush, where I don't feel comfortable asking specific questions, even
Yes.
though I want to know the answers to these questions. So I just kind of speculate, but I really don't know.
It's such a loss for him. It's
Mhm.
he could know you, both of you.
I know. I agree.
A loss for you, but also for him, you know?
Mhm.
Mm.
But I also am so grateful that we've met so many other people. We've literally met everyone else, and everyone else has been so welcoming, so loving. You can
Oh,
tell they're proud of us and proud of the women that we've become. So I'm grateful for that.
yeah.
and how's your birth mother been? And obviously your
Yeah.
adoptive parents were totally on board with everything, and that's
Yeah.
a really, that's such a gift because that's not
It
Yes.
always the
is.
case.
I agree. They
That's the
were really
wish, right?
supportive of
Yeah.
it all. And even though sometimes you could tell, like, sometimes I felt bad. Like, I don't want them to feel like I'm replacing them, because that's really not what it is. And I'm sure there were difficult feelings during this whole reunification process for them, as well as us. But I feel like overall they were very supportive, and they've just viewed it as their family growing. So my parents view, like, my Zambian aunt, who we built a relationship with, she would come to my parents' home. They would treat her like as if she was another daughter. So
Oh,
everyone in my family treated her like family as well. So it just feels like your family is growing, and that you just have more people who love you, which is never a bad thing.
never.
But and my birth mother as well, she was really loving and caring toward us always, since before we were born. As I found out when I read my adoption file, there was a little blurb about that the social worker said that you could tell she was attached to us before birth, and that the decision to release us was a difficult one. But even once I met her, you could just tell how much she's always loved us, and that she was probably waiting since the day that she gave us up. She was probably waiting for that day, just hoping that
This
she
is
would
the
meet us
issue
again.
with the adoption system, right? Is that
Mhm.
here is this pregnant person,
Mhm.
A
we all
teenager, a
know,
child herself.
right, but
Mhm.
that wants to be with her babies and wants to raise them. There are no resources for her.
No
They're
resources.
just shut
Exactly.
out. And and it is pretty much better for those kids to stay with that mother if she's capable of it.
Yes. I agree. Even though I'm grateful for the life I had, the older I get, the more I think
Yeah.
about that piece.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
The
Eh,
system doesn't provide,
It doesn't.
it's just
yes.
the adoption industry
Mhm.
There's money for
favors the
adoption, but
adoptive
not,
parents.
yeah.
It favors the
Exactly.
adoptive parents.
Even in my adoption file, one of the things that stood out to me, it said that my birth mother started her first appointment or session with the adoption agency was when she was 5 months pregnant, and she was seen by a social worker 19 times
Oh,
between then and when she gave birth. And then I asked her, I was like, were you ever seen again after the adoption
no,
for any counseling? And she was like, no. So they saw her as many times as she needed before the adoption,
of
but
course.
afterwards it was like, oh, you're 16, the babies are adopted, live your life and figure
Yes.
it out.
I
And
found
no
out a little
resources.
bit about that from my aunt too, about my birth mother.
Mhm.
Tons of social worker visits. She didn't have the money. Her family didn't have the money to help. And then Zippo, nothing.
Yeah, yeah,
That's that pressure. That's that system.
exactly. Mhm.
And just the fact she told your brother and he knew. So your brother's like,
Yeah,
I have sisters out there. That's says so much.
exactly. And there were pictures of us, and after we met her, she would put pictures of us on the wall. So when we would go visit her, after that, our pictures are there on the wall. Like, they're
Oh,
proud of us. We're a part of their family. We were never hidden. It was just, these are your sisters, and they don't live with us, but one day you'll meet them.
And
they'll be part of your
how is your
family.
relationship now?
Mhm.
With my birth mother and my brother,
Uh-huh.
really good. I talked, and her sister as well. So my birth mother and her sister that we met that day, they're really close, and her sister was there to support her throughout the whole pregnancy. So even when I talk to my aunt, she'll kind of have those same feelings of trauma kind of that my birth mother had, because she was along with her for that ride and there in the hospital with us before they had to give us up. So she kind of feels that same connection to us as well. And my birth mother named us after them. So, or their names are Nicole and Crystal, and they named us Nicole and Crystal before we were adopted. So yeah, they both have that connection to us. And yeah, I talk to them fairly regularly. I actually want them to come visit me this summer. I was telling them it would be a cool idea for her, at my birth mother, her sister, my sister, and me to do kind of a girls' weekend.
Oh yeah.
And just have the opportunity to spend time together as adults and just talk about anything and everything. I feel like that would be really healing for all of us, and just a good opportunity to even just get to know each other on a different level.
Yeah.
And my brother, I think he's hilarious. I love his personality. We get along really well. And it's different. It's a different connection, but I still feel connected to them. Even though I wasn't raised with him or raised with my birth mother, I still feel that connection there of like, we're the same. I can tell we have the same genes, even personality wise, not just looks. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I have my birth mother's sense of humor. Like, how did I get that, even though I wasn't raised with her? It's fascinating sometimes to think about
Isn't that
the
interesting?
genetics piece of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
Nature versus nurture. Yeah.
And does your sister do you live near each other?
We used to. So we used to live in neighboring provinces in Canada, so Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, but I moved a few years ago to Toronto. So now, before we used to be just a short drive away, a few hours away, now we're a flight away. So we don't see each other as much, but we FaceTime every day. We talk every day.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not a day that goes by that we're not in some sort of communication. And yeah, a lot of the time it's FaceTiming, and we just update each other on our lives. Like, even after this, I'll probably FaceTime her and be like, so the podcast went great.
Does she listen to the podcast?
She doesn't have much time to listen to podcasts because she has 3 kids.
Oh, okay.
6 and under. Yeah. And I'm the one who I only have a dog, so I have all the time for all the adoption podcasts.
I know that you're a wonderful aunt to her kids.
I love her kids. I like to say that they're my kids too, because we have the same DNA. So really, if they did a test, no one could say that they're not my kids.
Yeah.
But that was another thing as well that I found was eye-opening. Her having kids and then seeing that genetics piece, or the feeling that I had toward them. I felt so connected toward them, and I felt like they were a part of me. And it was just a feeling that I had never felt before, other than with my sister. So it was really interesting.
It's very healing. Do her children know everybody too? Has everybody met the kids?
They, my birth mother's side, have met the kids, and she just recently, actually, like within the past couple months, had to explain to her oldest, because he had said something like, oh, like when you were in grandma's belly, and he was referring to our adoptive mom, and we were like, and he said it to me, and I was like, ask your mom. Because I didn't want to explain it. But I was like, not quite, ask your mom. So she had to explain to him, like, we weren't in grandma's belly, we were in Nicole's belly, and like that whole story. But he's only 6, so she thought he would have a bunch of questions, and he was just like, okay. So she's like, he'll probably ask again.
It's better
later.
It's better to talk about it too and be normalized, right? It's like,
yeah, exactly.
And what about your aunt? Is she still there from Zambia? She still lives in the area?
No, so she back in, I don't know when it was, but when we were teenagers, she had finished university and ended up moving to England. So she currently lives in England. We haven't seen her since that trip to Zambia that we took together in 2011. and we haven't seen our grandparents since either. But I would love to plan another trip to Zambia
Oh
and
yeah.
meet my uncle. My uncle lives there in my grandparents' home where we stayed in 2011. And he tells me that I'm welcome there anytime. So I would love to travel back there and stay there again. Now that I'm older and I can appreciate how big of a deal it was, because even though I was 19, I didn't really get how big of a deal it was to be traveling to your home country for the first time and meeting all of your biological family. Even when we arrived at our grandparents' home, I remember we walked in and my grandmother was home, but she was nowhere to be seen. And we were like, where is she? And then we kind of like went in the house, and my aunt was saying she's probably hiding. And we're like, why? And she's like, she's just going to be really overwhelmed. And then so we kind of peek around the corner, and she comes outside and just breaks down and starts hysterically. She grabbed us both in her arms and just broke down and started sobbing. And I remember, even now, I'm remembering the feelings, and I remember feeling so overwhelmed because to me, it was just this woman that I don't know who is having this overwhelming reaction about me, but she doesn't even know me. So, and now in hindsight, I know how I feel about my nephews and how strongly I love them. And for her, realizing that she has granddaughters, her first granddaughters, automatically she's like, I love them so deeply. And seeing us for the first time now, in hindsight, I can see how powerful and overwhelming that moment would have been for her. I'll send you guys photos.
Okay,
please.
My mom was really good at capturing the photos. And there's a few photos where you can just see the emotion in her face, but she was just sobbing and held us both. And she kept saying, I never got to carry you on my back. And we didn't know what that meant. But a lot of African grandmas, they have, I don't know what it's called in every country, but in Zambia, they called it a chitenge. And it was this material that you wrap around, and it's kind of like a backpack, and your baby would be on your back, carried on your back. And so that's what she was saying. I never got to carry you on my back, because to her, she missed the opportunity of carrying her grandchildren on her back. And I was like, wow. Now in hindsight, I'm like, wow, I didn't know what all of that meant.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you were still very young, and now you're like, oh my God, huge.
Wow, what a moment.
And also just the fact the whole family knows you and your dad doesn't know you. And when they all get together, do they talk about this? It's bizarre to me.
I know. Well, my aunt did tell me that. So my grandmother has since, unfortunately, she has dementia. So she's living in a home in England, and she has photos of us on the wall. And so when he goes to visit her, there's photos of us on the wall. Like my aunt said, no one hides us. No one hides the fact that they have a relationship with us. And the people that we met there still ask about us. How are the twins? I hope they're doing well in Canada. No one hides it. So it must be difficult or awkward, but everyone who has a relationship with us seems to be proud of it and not trying to hide it. Yeah.
Maybe someday he'll
come around.
I
come
hope
around.
So.
Yeah.
I think so too. Yeah.
Well, please keep us posted and send us the pictures.
I will.
Lovely.
Love the photos.
We will love them.
Yeah. So great to finally talk to you. And
yes, it was.
I'm so glad that all this reunion and what an incredible story. Really.
Really. And tell your sister hello.
It's one of the most positive adoption
it
stories.
Is very positive. Yes.
Yeah.
Positive and just stories, crazy with the mall thing. I'm just, it's really a first.
Yes.
Honestly.
I'm so glad you connected with us.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on.
No problem.
Okay. Keep in touch. Send us the pictures.
Yes.
Okay. No problem.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.